The concept for EPARTRADE is basically, in my opinion, there's a big hole in the internet. So the internet started many years ago, but there's never been an online business community for racers on the World Wide Web. The need for EPARTRADE is actually quite obvious. Basically, people in the business of auto racing need a place online to hang out and get their problems solved.
It's extremely simple for a buyer or for a supplier to interact on the platform. The first thing you need to do is sign in, which is free. And the second thing is, when you see a product that you're interested in, all you need to do is click on request more information. If it's a company, you click on request more information, and then from there, it is forwarded directly to the buyer or to the supplier.
You can go to epartrade.com, you become part of a community of businesses in racing, and it makes sourcing products much easier than just on the internet or using Google.
At EPARTRADE, there is no e-commerce. It's literally a connection just like at a trade show. So now, any time of the year, a buyer could reach out to a supplier through an email.
More than that, it's a place to go just to keep current every day. So it's a good place to start your workday in your racing business or in your offices of your professional race team. And you know you're current when it comes to new technology, industry news, technical papers, technical videos, all of that and more. We're not looking for a million hits per day. All we want is people who are really the volume buyers of racing products in the racing industry to be part of the little world of EPARTRADE. We have racing businesses participating from around the world. So you get suppliers from around the world, you get buyers from around the world.
EPARTRADE really eliminates having to travel, closing down your shop. Now you have a place to showcase globally your racing product and technology.
Hello and welcome to Race Industry Now, the technical and business webinar series from EPARTRADE, presented to you by ARP and Performance Plus Global Logistics. I am Francisque Savignan, the founder and CEO of EPARTRADE. This is the episode 224 of the EPARTRADE technical and business webinar series. And today we are going to welcome back a very dear friend, Lex Speed Jr. We're going to be talking dyno room tools and tips. And Lex is bringing a very special guest with him, Mr. Don MacAskill from Shaver Specialties Racing Engines. So with me this morning are Judy Kim, the co-founder of EPARTRADE, and our wonderful host, Mr. Brad Gillie. Judy?
Thank you, Francis. Today, our attendance is outstanding. And I know it's the combination of having Lex Speed Jr., the topic of tools and tips in the dyno room, but also having Dyno Don over at Ron Shaver Racing Engines with us, one of the most outstanding leading engine builders in the country. And they were my personal 20-year exhibitor at PRI. So I know them very well. Excited to have them all. So on to you, Mr. Brad Gillie.
Well, thank you, Judy, and thank you very much, Francisque. And I'm excited as well. Look, anytime we get to have Lex Speed Jr. on here, it's a lot of fun. And I know even if you even do a search for Don MacAskill and Lex Speed Jr., you're going to find a lot of different videos out there and a lot of things that they've done together. So I know this is going to be fun. Gentlemen, welcome. How y'all doing today?
Doing good. Thanks, Brad. We're doing great, Brad. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, likewise. Just to start things off, as a reminder, if you have a question for either Lex Speed Jr. and or Dyno Don, you are more than welcome to type it into the chat, and we'll get those questions answered as much as we can. But we've got a lot of ground that we're going to cover here for sure when we talk about dyno room tools and tips, and I think this is going to be a lot of fun. So Don, first of all, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
1 hour? Only 1 hour? If it's only an hour, we're going to have to leave a lot of stuff out. You know, Lake and I, when we do this, we have so much fun talking about it because we've spent so much time together over 10 years, I think, since we've started this whole process. And this is one of our fun things to do. Not only do we learn a lot, but we work so well together that we finally got to the point where we just really wanted to let people know what we're doing. Right. And so that's one of the reasons why we're here.
I think this is fantastic and an important thing to talk about. And I know we're going to cover a lot of things when it comes to the dyno room, oil testing, and different things as well. But let's just start out. Let's just give like a quick overview, because when people talk about, well, this, I put the engine on the dyno and it did this, but, was it an engine dyno? Was it a chassis dyno? Was it a hub dyno? What are some of the differences and what's important in each one?
Well, we here at Shavers, Ron Shaver started this whole thing a million years ago, it seems like, and that's one of the reasons why we've been in business for so long. We actually have two engine dynos here. We have an old Heenan, which is right behind us here. You can maybe see some of it, which we do most of the gasoline stuff on, gasoline motors mostly. And then we have a brand new Superflow Black Widow dyno, which is right next door. The two dynos are right next to each other. Side, yeah. And we got this dyno, oh gosh, when you first started coming here, we had the old dyno over there. So it's probably 7 or 8 years old now. And the new Superflow dyno, thank you, Superflow, is one of the most accurate dynos that I've ever used. I've been dynoing engines for over 25 years. I have thousands and thousands of engines under my belt, tens of thousands of dyno runs, and this dyno is one of the best ones that I've ever used. And both of them are water brake dynos. The difference between the engine dynos and the chassis dynos are that the chassis dynos, you put a whole race car on, you put a whole car on, and the chassis dyno is driven either by the wheel or by the hub itself. Now, what we do a lot of times is most of the stuff is, as you guys know, that we do is sprint car engines. Yeah. So we do all the preliminary testing here on the sprint car motors, and then a lot of the top teams will actually put them in the car and do the final testing on them on a chassis dyno. So they'll actually hook the sprint car up to the chassis dyno, simulate racing simulations, and fine tune the engines after we give them some tune-up sheets for a baseline to start. So basically the difference is this is a water brake. A water brake kind of works like a torque converter almost. So the engine drives this torque converter. You put water in. The more water you put on it, the more load that comes on the engine. And there's a whole series of sophisticated electronics that monitor every aspect of the engine that we watch and record as we're doing the runs. The same thing with the chassis dyno. It's just that this one just works with the engine. The chassis dyno works with the whole race car.
Right. And one thing about this older dyno versus the new dyno is this is a single servo. So there's one valve controlling the water flow into the old dyno. That new dyno, the Superflow Black Widow, has two, which is why it's so consistent, which for the sprint car engines is really, really important, especially when you're making, how many foot-pounds of torque do those things make? Pound feet, I'm sorry, whatever. Sorry, I can't help myself.
Well, I started
800 something.
When I first started. I remember the first engine that we made 800 horsepower with, and we were all ecstatic. It was great. Well, in the last 24, 25 years or so, we've been working on this new Ford project, and I can't give out the exact numbers, but we are well over 950 horsepower now. Torque-wise, we're looking at between, depending on the racetrack, we will tailor an engine for different racetracks, anywhere from 680 foot-pounds of torque to 730 foot-pounds of torque.
Yeah.
Wow. So, and Don, I say when it comes to sprint car engines, Don, how many championships have you been building engines for now?
Ooh. A lot.
Well, if you just
is there at least 10 World of Outlaw championships alone, right?
Since I've been here, we've compiled 10 World of Outlaws championships, but throughout the country there are different sprint car racing series in different parts of the country, and I'm guessing that in the 25 years I've been here, it's probably close to 50.
Yeah, how many does Damien have? Like Damien Gardner is one of our customers here. He's in and out of the shop all the time. Yeah. He's a big CRA race guy. How many does Damien have?
Damien just got his ninth championship.
Nice. Okay, yeah. So between Donnie Schatz and Damien, there's almost 20.
There's almost 20 right there. That's just two guys, and that doesn't take into account the other series across the country that we build motors for. And it's not just across the country too. We sell motors to Australia and some other parts of the world too. Not very often, but most of the stuff we do is here in the country. But literally, we stopped counting. Because we've accomplished all the stuff that we really kind of wanted to do. We're all getting old. I'm the youngest one here. I'm 61. So we've really accomplished a lot. And it's been such a fun ride, and we've learned so much. Especially, I've learned so much from Ron Shaver being here for 25 years. It's just been an incredible ride.
Yeah, well, let's talk, you talk about the differences between the dynos, but is there anything learned on just an engine dyno that you don't get on a chassis dyno or vice versa?
Well, and that's a great question, because one of the processes that we go through on the engine dyno that we don't go through on the chassis dyno. When I get done testing, well, there's a certain progression of things that I do, starting with putting the engine on the dyno: water, oil, fuel, electricity. Though I follow those rules every time. In other words, when I'm putting an engine on the dyno, I do the water first, oil next, fuel next, electricity next, whatever ignition system. I do that the same every single time. The key with the engine dyno itself, which has the advantage over the chassis dyno, is that when I get done dynoing an engine, there are a number of checks that we do that the chassis dyno doesn't do, and we're gonna talk a little bit about.
It's way easier to do them on an engine dyno than it is on a chassis dyno.
So I don't know if you can see, there's an engine right behind us here. Because everything's so open on the engine dyno, I can basically strip the motor partially the way down.
Right.
And I can check way more things. I can check, I run through the valves, check the oil. And we're going to talk about checking the oil here in a minute. But there's so many things that I can check on the engine dyno that you cannot do on the chassis dyno. Or most people don't have the time to do it on the chassis dyno, and they don't really want to take their engine apart after it's in the race car.
Right.
Yeah, that you know what, and that's pretty fascinating. When an engine is dynoed on the engine dyno, is it considered broken in after that as well?
That's the goal.
That's another great question. So the first thing that I do on the engine dyno, after I make sure that the engine's running, after I make sure that it's timed correctly, after I make sure that the fuel is correct, is I will run the engine from between 30 and 45, 50 minutes. Just as a break-in process. I put a certain amount of load on the engine, and at a certain RPM, and that in combination with the correct oils that we're using, which we've learned over the last years, there's a certain combination that I go through the first, let's say, 45 minutes of running the engine, just to break the engine in. Which is something you really can't do in the car. As a matter of fact, we made a video about that.
Yeah, there are actually. If you really want to know the details, we could spend probably 10, 15 minutes, Brad, talking about that right now. We actually have some videos on the Total Seal YouTube channel where Dyno Don and I go through and say, if you're breaking in an engine on the dyno, here's exactly what to do. This is the procedure that we've been using to do engine testing together for at least 15 years, and we know that it works. And then we also have one for if you're doing it in the car. If you don't have an engine dyno, well, how do you do it in the car? We have a procedure for that as well. So both of those are on the Total Seal YouTube channel. You can go check those out whenever you want to.
Very informative. A lot of folks don't have the option of putting their motor on the dyno. So we've kind of put together what they can do in their by putting the engine in the car to try to achieve the same thing.
And we should just note, by the way, break-in isn't just for flat tappet cams.
No, that's not true.
Piston rings need break-in, push rod tips. There's all kinds of load-bearing components in an engine that need to be broken in. That's why break-in oil, break-in procedure, it's hand and glove. They go together. And that's what really, in the end, gives you longer engine life.
Correct.
Because if you're wearing the parts out to get it to break in, you're just giving up engine life. And all those parts cost a lot of money, and some days they're pretty hard to find. So don't give them away, don't give it away, right? There's a way you can do this that is easier and works better and gives you longer life, and sometimes better performance too.
Exactly. And so after the break-in procedure is when the fun starts for me, because basically my job is to work that engine as hard as I possibly can. And when I say that, the engine dyno will put more load on most engines than any car will ever. I can stall a 900 horsepower motor with my dyno. That's how good this dyno is. So the race car, you can't do that unless you're running into a wall. So
you don't want that.
You don't want that. So the fun part about my job is after I do the break-in procedure, then I actually start doing the regular testing where I will run the engine through its paces under full load for the purpose of a number of reasons. One, to make sure nothing's going to break, because it's a mechanical part. There's lots of pieces in there. Sometimes parts break.
Right.
So I want to put it through its paces so that by the time we get it to the customer, he is assured that he can just put the engine in the car, put water, oil, and hook up his ignition, and it's ready to race. When I get done with the engine, it's all checked out. I have an assortment of tools that I use, which we're going to show, and the engine is done, ready to put in the car and ready to race. The sprint car guys, for example, you know, when they get to the racetrack, there's no starter motors on these cars, you know, on a sprint car motor. So they have to make sure that that engine is ready to go right when they push off.
The barrel valves adjusted and all that stuff, right? He sits there, spends 30 minutes, an hour fiddling with the barrel valves to get it right, so that it will idle right, it will start, it will accelerate and do all that. That's all the stuff that, again, you could do that on a chassis dyno, but you don't want to, because it's not fun to do it. On the engine dyno, that's the place and the way to do it.
Just because everything's so open and it's easy to get to it. And it just makes it so much easier for our customers. So we hand them a motor and say, put it in the race car and go have fun.
Race.
Yeah, so being able to break it in and then doing all the tuning, the different thing that you do, you know, what are some of those things? What's important about that?
Well, first of all, a sprint car motor, the fuel system on a sprint car motor is very, very stupid. It's very stupid. And the reason I say that is it's constant flow fuel injection with methanol. Okay. So what that means is how you set your fuel settings. You set your barrel valve, you set your high speed, you set your main jet pill, and the type of fuel pump you're using. These are the only things that control the amount of fuel in the engine. The person that's working on the vehicle or on the engine has to tell all those things what to do. Unlike a electronic fuel injected motor like the
Holley EFI system that freaking learns.
That learns.
If you got an O2 sensor, it will learn and fix itself.
Yeah, it'll fix
Mechanical fuel injection will not fix it.
Mechanical fuel injection doesn't do that. A carburetor, a regular Holley carburetor, people don't understand how smart the carburetor is, because the carburetor, the basis of a carburetor works on atmospheric pressure. And so as the atmospheric pressure changes, as the vent tray is open, the carburetor compensates for that. Mechanical fuel injection doesn't. It doesn't do that. So one of my biggest jobs here on the dyno with a sprint car motor, and we do other things besides sprint car motors, but most of our stuff, 95% of our stuff is all sprint car stuff. I have to measure the fuel going into the engine. There's a number of things that I'm measuring at the same time. And then I have to adjust that to get the optimum performance out of the engine. And when I do that, you know, I come up with a dyno sheet like this. And then for all my customers, I will give them what's called a tune-up sheet. And you kind of barely see it here. It's a tune-up sheet. And basically what this does is it tells the customer what to do as the weather changes. And this is very important.
Because you're going to need one of these. So this is absolutely mandatory.
Because of my job, I am a weather freak, okay? I have weather measuring equipment wherever I go.
Oh yeah, there's like 3 in your house.
I got one at the river house. I take wherever I go. So I will always know what the current weather is. Basically, I've been doing it so long I can do it by feel now. But in the field, they have a number of tools like this. It's called race air, and basically it measures the atmospheric pressure, the humidity, and temperature, and it calculates your corrected altitude.
Yeah.
And that's what most of the race car guys, when they get to the racetrack, they will look at their weather station and they go, okay, then they'll go back to my sheet and say, with this particular weather condition, this is the fuel that we need to run. And that's one of the biggest things, because of the fact that the fuel system on a sprint car is so stupid. You have to know how to tell it what to do. And because we've been doing this so long, we've gotten pretty good at it.
And most guys who race with mechanical fuel injection already know that, right?
Yeah.
It will bite you in the butt quickly if you don't. It's one place like, Bonneville to me is one of the places where I think it can really make a big difference. Like you can go out in the morning in Bonneville and check this and get, say 5,000 feet. But then by mid-afternoon, it might correct to 11,000 feet. It can change that much. So having one of these and checking it throughout the day, throughout the night.
So important.
You have to stay on top of it, especially with mechanical fuel injection, because you're literally putting so much fuel in the engine. Now, one reason methanol is such a great fuel is it gives you a really wide tuning window. You would be pulling your hair out to try to run gasoline on mechanical injection. You have a death wish.
Virtually impossible. Most people know the difference between gasoline and methanol. It takes
air fuel ratio wise.
Yeah, it takes about twice the amount of methanol to make the engine run as it does gasoline. Because of that, our fuel window, depending on what crew chief you are and how far you like to, how many motors you like to burn up. Our fuel window is quite a bit bigger with the methanol. If we are within 10% of optimum, the engine really won't know it. The engine will still run fine. If you are off 2 or 3% with that same engine on gasoline, you can burn it up. Yeah, that's the big difference.
Wow, that's pretty incredible. And I love it too, especially when we have Lake Speed on here, that there's always some new tool or toy that we get to see that people are showing. But
there's so many more, Brad. There's so many
we got lots of them.
I wish we had more than an hour. I swear we did. But,
go ahead. I was going to just remind people, if you have a question, you can definitely type it into the chat, and we're just going to keep going here because this is great. But all of those things, and obviously once you finish with the dyno, let's talk about analyzing the oil and some of the other things that happen afterwards.
Oh, very important.
Well, like we were saying with fuel. So like just yesterday, we were dynoing, Monday it was, we were dynoing one of the engines here. We're doing some ring testing for total seal, and that's a gasoline engine. We were looking at the fuel flows, and we were running about 180 pounds per hour, whereas the methanol engines, they're going to run close to 400 pounds per hour of fuel. Yeah. Well, that's one of the great things that used oil analysis, right? There's a sample from that engine on Monday that we'll send off to the lab and have it analyzed. And one of the things we're going to look at is the amount of fuel in the oil, because one of the things that we were doing on Monday is we were changing to our reference fuel. So here in Southern California, you've got, the carb, area gasoline and everything, which is 91 octane. And we've always been consistent of going to the mobile corner,
same gas station
around the corner all the time. Yeah. We always go over there and get gas. Well, last time we were here, it was closed. There's some construction or something. Yeah. And we went to another gas station and got gas. And the results were really different.
How long did we fight that? We fought that for hours.
We did.
We knew that there was a problem and we couldn't figure it out. And then, like a light bulb switching on again, we remembered because we've run into similar problems before. But, we really needed to be consistent on the fuel. So
the whole idea was, we've known in the past, right? Most people know this. There's winter blend fuels and there's summer blend fuels. And we've always seen that around here. We kind of know what differences. Because we get this same engine over here that literally has like 4,000 or 5,000 plus dyno runs on it. We know what it does, right? And so we can see those little differences, but it's one of those things where it caught us. We went to a different gas station, and it was winter blend versus summer blend. And when you're looking at little minute details, you can't have that as a variable. So what we decided to do is get rid of that, and we went to a different fuel. So we got some VPC20, and we were baselining that new fuel compared to the pump fuel. And we just wanted to make sure everything was catch. So what we're going to do is we'll analyze this oil. We want to make sure that, okay, with the carburetor set the way it is, with the fuel flows we saw, how much fuel are we getting in the oil? We want to maintain that consistency, because in the end, fuel and blow-by are the enemy of your engine oil. That's what kills your engine oil. The same base oils that are in motor oil that maybe last 3,000 to 10,000 miles, depending upon the size and different things like of your engine, will last 10,000 hours in a turbine engine.
Because of the lack of contaminants in the fuel.
Right. Turbine engines are just as hot as gasoline engines or internal combustion engines. The difference is turbines, the oil is never exposed to combustion. byproducts. So that's where the used oil analysis really comes in handy, because it can tell you what wear metals. For example, actually, we took the engine apart because we're actually, okay, I'm gonna give you a little preview here. So after this is done, we're going over to the other dyno cell, and we're gonna be testing a brand new coating that we're putting on the rings.
Yep.
So without getting into all the details, this is a new 2-layer coating. So it's kind of soft on the outside to make break-in easy. Then it's hard on the inside.
Analogy, give them the analogy.
So it's the opposite of an M&M's, right? M&M's is hard on the outside and soft on the inside. Well, we're doing the opposite on the piston ring. So we're going to test that this afternoon. Now, to do that, you have to pull the engine apart, because testing piston rings means you got to take the engine completely apart, and you got to hone it. And we did all that stuff yesterday.
Correct finish on the board.
We were measuring profilometer, did all that stuff yesterday. While we're taking the engine apart, though, we have to notice something. There was a little bit of trash and took out one of the main bearings, right? So what we will be able to see is that wear metal in the used oil. Now, did the engine show us any signs?
No.
No. It ran fine. Is this bearing dying right now? It's not failing.
Did the oil pressure change?
No.
None of that changed.
But we can still see wear on the bearing.
Right.
We know this bearing's life will be shorter.
Yeah.
All the other ones look perfect.
Yeah.
Used oil analysis is going to show us that. We will for certain see higher copper, tin, and lead in this sample than our previous samples.
Right.
So that's the real benefit of used oil analysis. It's that other channel of data, right? Like Don was talking about, this dyno collects hundreds of channels of data, airflows, fuel, all those kind of things. This is going to give you wear metals, fuel dilution, things like that. And if you have a series, if you do it all the time, then you can begin to know what's normal for your engine.
Exactly.
Then you can see any deviation and say, oh, wait, I'm seeing copper, tin, and lead go up. My bearings must be in distress. Something's happening to my bearings. So you can replace it before there's catastrophic damage.
Exactly.
Because that was easy to fix.
Yes.
But if we had waited to throw a rod out the side, it would not be so easy to fix.
The other thing that's really important about the engine, the used engine oil analysis, is that when we were doing the camshaft testing, for example,
Yes.
okay, which we did a lot. I mean, hundreds and hundreds
of
camshafts
for comp cams.
Yeah, for comp cams, we would literally do 4 cams a day. We'd have guys in, all the engine guys in here. We'd do 4 cams a day. So on the break-in procedures, not only was I doing all my normal testing by looking at oil filters and seeing
Cutting
what the oil looks like, the thing that really made the testing work really well is all those things combined with the fact that we were testing the oil on the same time with the same combination. It taught us so much over the years.
Well, the other great thing too, Brad, is that when the guys at Comp would take those cams, they would go back to Memphis, and they've got these machines called ADCOs, which are hundreds of $1,000s precision measuring equipment. They can really measure parts to the millionth, and had profilometers. All the physical wear measurements on those cams had 100% correlation to what we saw in the oil. So that if we had, say, a cam that has, say, 10 parts per million of iron in the used oil, you may see a certain wear pattern. But if that same next cam we ran, if it had twice the amount of wear, we saw twice the amount of iron in the used oil. It was 100% correlation either direction. So, which is nice is that, the Speediagnostix, what separates this from any other used oil analysis, or you can go to Caterpillar or all kinds of places and get used oil analysis.
That's when we started.
Right, we did. When we first started, we did. And the thing is, those guys, it could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, it could be a month before you get your sample back, because this is how busy they are. With Speediagnostix, you're going to get it back in 6 days. 6 business days. You drop in the mail, 6 business days later, you have your results. The second part is it's actually designed for racers. So it's not written in FE, SN, and all those kind of things. It's not the chemical terms. It's written in English.
So you can understand it.
And it's all color coded.
Yeah.
So if everything's green, it means you're good to go. You don't have to worry about it. If there's something yellow, it means it's on the higher end of normal. It's not.
That's from the years of doing this. That we know where the danger signs are.
Right, and that's from my time at Joe Gibbs Racing, which was 15 years. We have all this data from all the years. So you're using a reference that is for racing engines, not diesel engines, because most labs you're going to go to, their reference is 10,000 mile drain sample on a diesel. Well, that doesn't tell you anything relative for a racing engine. So ours are all about racing engines, and some of the customers at Speediagnostix are professional race teams, and I know of just one that saved at least 3 race engines. They found engines that were about to fail and were able to change them out, which one prevented them from blowing up an engine during a race, which cost them points to keep them in the points championship. And, a lot of times they were able to take that engine back to the engine builder, save them hundreds of thousands of dollars. So even and their deal is because they race every week, they're doing the $120 3-day turnaround. So if you want your results faster, Speediagnostix can get you your results in 3 days. Mail it on Monday, get your results on Wednesday. It's $120. But if you're professionally racing, that's the cheapest money you'll ever spend.
For a $65,000 sprint car motor, that's cheap insurance.
Well, you think about this. The Formula One guys do stuff better than anybody else. I don't care if you like Formula One or not, but you can't argue the fact they are the elite. They do everything the absolute best in motorsports. They have used oil analysis people on site. There's not a time that race car comes off the racetrack, they're not taking samples out of the engine and the transmission, anything that's got a fluid in it, they're analyzing it at the racetrack.
Yeah.
And they're doing the same thing. They're doing trend analysis. So all this is Formula One technology available to you, and it's days, not hours, to get your results. But at least you're not talking weeks or months to get your data.
Yeah. And the other thing that has been so helpful, and I'm gonna go back and talk about, a little bit about the time that you spent, at Driven Racing Oil.
Yeah.
Because of all these checks that we do, because of all this oil analysis that we do, Lake has done a really good job of developing some really good oils. Okay. Thanks, Kyle Fickler, for sending us this. I'm holding up a bottle of Driven BR40 here. I don't use this because I have a 55-gallon drum of it. We have tested most oils that are available in the world.
We've tested
over the years. We've tested oils over the years. And, because of what we do here, I want to use the best oil that there is. This is the oil that we use because of what we have learned on all this testing. All this testing has led to this particular brand of oil, and I recommend this. When I put a tag on an engine when I'm done with it, I put a tag on that says that recommends this oil because it works out so well.
And I'll go a step further on this. It has nothing to do with the name on the label.
No.
It's the chemistry. What makes this special isn't the name, is what I'm trying to say. What makes it special is the chemistry.
It's the additive package that Lake has come up with over the years.
It was years and years of development.
Yes.
To make sure that we had the right levels of ZDP, not just more. More isn't always better. The right type of ZDP, the right level of ZDP, the right level of detergents, the absence of friction modifiers. That's what makes that oil special.
Yeah.
And it's what allows the camshafts to break in properly. It's what allows the piston rings to break in properly.
Exactly.
That's my go-to oil, not because of the name, it's because of the chemistry. I love the chemistry of that product because it's consistent. It gives us what we want to know. Like later today, we're going to dyno that engine and we're going to break in to see how does that coating work. Well, the only way to do it
with
is
this
the
oil.
baseline.
Yeah, and
you can't just jump around. You can't change your assembly lubes. You can't change your braking oil. Hey, that's why we did the work the other day with the fuel.
Yeah.
We wanted to. You can't change more things, 2 things at a time.
Right.
And know what you did. That's why we
Which
did
we've
fuel.
learned the hard way.
We have learned the hard way. Yeah. Listen, I'm from Mississippi. I ain't smart, right? It's years and years of shooting myself in the foot. It's like, ow, that hurts. Don't do that anymore. Yeah. So that's why we did the baseline testing on the fuel the other day to find out what timing did it want, what jetting did it want, all those kind of things. So we had a baseline for the fuel so we could do the test today and have confidence in what those results are. And that's the key thing is you need to have a baseline of knowing what's normal. And, obviously the used oil analysis, we got the little kit here, which by the way, it's super easy. When you buy the kit, the box comes and everything you need to do the sample is in the box, right? It has one instruction sheets, right? So guys, actually read this. My daughter, Speediagnostix is a family company. So my wife, my daughter, my son, they're all involved in this. And this is the bane of her existence is people that don't read the results, the instructions. And they just send in the box. They're like, you didn't do anything. What'd you do, right? So, and it also comes with the prepaid mailer to send it back. So all you have to do is take your sample bottle, fill the bottle, all the instructions are there, fill out the form online, take this, put it in the box, drop it in the mail, and depending upon what you paid for, either 3 days later or 6 days later, you're going to get your results. So it's pretty simple and easy. So that's one piece. But you also want to do something like check leak down, right? That's another really great tool that's very easy to do coming off the dyno.
Standard procedure for us.
Right. So there's something that, again, on the dyno, you can leak it down. You can tell, hey, here's the health of those cylinders. How you know what your rings are conditioned in is this. Then again, that's the information that Don can give to his customers, and they can do this at the racetrack themselves.
Exactly. One of the procedures that we tell all of our customers is after each race. I mean, and they really have to do it after each race. These motors are so taxed. You want to make sure that it's fine before you go to the next race. Is we'll have a list of things for them to do that they can do at home in their garage, and that is one of them. They check the leak down to make sure if there's a problem with the ring or a problem with the piston, it'll show up very quickly on the leak down. That's one of the things they do. The other, as far as the tools of the trade, one of the things that is also very important is, because we're spinning these motors, on the 410 motors, some of the guys are spinning them a little over 9,000 RPM. On the 360 motors, they're going a little bit more than that because they don't have quite the power. So one of the things that fails most often in a sprint car motor, for example, will be the valve springs. Yep. And so we have some fairly sophisticated tools that we use that we have the customers buy so that they can do that check after every race. That way they know that they don't have a valve spring that's weak or leaking or that's weak or broken. And it's just very good to check. Also too, when they're checking the valve springs, they check the valve lash first. Yep. So, and obviously it's just it's just feeler gauge. And then we have some special tools that we use for the rock arms that we use that makes it easy to adjust. When you have a valve that changes the amount of clearance that it's supposed to have to a certain spot, there's going to be an issue. Right. An issue with the lifter issue, with a push rod issue, with the rock arm. So they can find that really easily. And one of the other things that a lot of these guys will do is, and I do this on the dyno all the time, is how do you actually look inside of the cylinder to find out what it looks like, to see if there's an excessive amount of oil, if there's scratches in the cylinder wall, if a valve is hitting a piston. Well, there's some very inexpensive endoscopes that you can buy. This one I think came from Amazon. It's like $35. Right. You buy that. They Bluetooth to your phone. Bluetooth to your phone. Stupid easy. Bluetooth to your phone. You can either take a picture or a video of whatever you're doing. Right. And that way you can actually see inside the motor, and it doesn't have to just be in the cylinder. You can put it down the intake manifold. You can put it, you can actually stick it, through the drain plug and look up there if you need to. Very important tool for the dyno. Well, and the thing is, it paints a picture, right, Brad? And that's really what we're saying is that if you're using this tool, if you're using the leak down, if you're doing the oil analysis, if you're checking your springs, if you are cutting your oil filter apart, right,
All of these things now paint the picture. You're not relying on one point of data. You can now say, okay, the oil analysis is telling me I'm seeing some wear, maybe some iron and aluminum. That's going to probably be piston and cylinder bore wear. Well, then I can go down here, I can look inside and see, is there scoring on there? Well, what was my leak down telling me? Yeah. Well, if they're all telling me there's a problem, I can see it on the leak, I can see it in the oil, and then I can go in the hole and see it. Guess what? You got a cylinder bore wear problem. Then you can know that, okay, don't run the engine anymore. Send it back, get it fixed before you put a window inside your block or your oil pan.
What this does is it, especially on a very expensive motor, and it doesn't have to be just an expensive motor, but what it does is it saves the customer tons of money. Yep. Because not only can we check that stuff here, but we are teaching the people that are using our products to do the same thing so that they don't have to buy a brand new motor because one blew up for some stupid reason that they could have caught.
Right. And again, establishing that baseline right here in the dyno cell is the key, because just when it is brand new, when it's broken in and right, this is going to be the number to reference.
Exactly.
Once it's broken in, because the springs are going to take a seat, all that dyno time is getting them to take a seat. That post-dyno spring test, that's going to be your baseline. Yeah. On the oil, the highest amount of wear that's normal for your engine is during break-in. So taking a break-in sample isn't one to throw away. It's the one you want the most, right, because that's the high water mark for your engine. If you ever see wear that high again, there's a problem.
That's a very good thing. And I'm glad you brought that up, because this is one of the things that I wanted to talk about too. And we learned this together quite a long time ago. Because of, the oil analysis, the wear on a brand new engine, the wear characteristics on a brand new engine will be the most. It will have the greatest wear in the first 30 to 45 minutes. That's where there will be the most contaminants. A brand new motor, it's hard. You can have the best clean room that you want. You're always going to get a few contaminants in there. The most metal that you're going to have in that engine, if there's not a problem with it.
If there's not a problem with it.
If it's not losing a bearing or a ring or whatever, will be in that first 30 or 40 minutes. So one of the things that I do that I recommend to folks, there's a lot of engine guys out there say, yeah, we'll run your break-in oil for 500 miles. Huge mistake. It's a huge mistake, because that oil will have contaminants that the oil filter does a really, really good job, but it's not going to catch everything. So I always recommend the last brand new car I bought. I ran the thing for 50 miles and I changed the oil and filter, put the same oil filter back in it, but I wanted to get those contaminants out of the system right from the get-go. And of course we learned that from doing this oil analysis.
Oh yeah, exactly. And it's like Don said, it's that highest amount of wear is during break-in. And it's because all those parts and pieces have peaks and valleys. It can look smooth to the naked eye, but everything has peaks and valleys. So you want those peaks to kind of wear down and become more like plateaus, which is what we talk about in honing all the time, right? We spent time yesterday on the hone because that engine had already been honed. It hadn't run long enough that we needed to re-hone it. We put it back in the hone and we use a 320 brush to get the tops just roughened up enough so the rings would bite in without changing the geometry. Right. So we want to have that plateau. You want it to be basically smooth on top with the valleys underneath to hold the oil. And that's what we were able to do by using the profilometer to measure that. So if you imagine what we're doing with cylinder honing, imagine that actually works on every other part of the engine.
Exactly.
And not all the other parts of the engine, like a pushrod tip, they don't have a hone for that. So you just got to do it on the dyno, and you need to make sure you got the right lubes and things in there. And this is what's going on. But again, the whole idea of this webinar is to say, take a holistic view that when the engine is on the dyno, take advantage of all the tools that are available, right? Leak down testers, bore scopes.
Very important also.
Oil analysis, do all of these things to get that bigger picture of what the health of the engine is, establish that baseline that you can then measure off the dyno, because you're not going to be able to pull all the data with you at the racetrack that the dyno is going to give you. But if you can marry up the dyno data with this physical data you can pick up. Now you have a baseline to carry forward to make sure you're in good shape.
You know, one of the things that I brag about sometimes, you know, as most of everybody knows that what we do, we work with Tony Stewart and Donnie Schatz. And during those 10 years that he won the championship, and there was more than 10 years. He didn't win 10 straight. I think he finished second a couple of times.
I think it was once. But anyway,
whatever. During that period of time, and we lost track, but there were at least 450 straight races that
he ran
without an engine failure.
Right.
And this is because of all this testing that we've done over the last 25 years.
Right. Well, when you just started developing the Ford engine, like one of the very first things we ever did was take oil analysis.
Exactly.
I mean, right from the very go, it's like, okay, what is this engine telling us in comparison to the Chevrolet?
Which was slightly different.
Right, it was. And it's like, these are the tools that you can use to guide yourself so you're not guessing.
Right.
So how often should someone do the oil analysis, and does it matter on what type of track they're running? Let's say they're always somewhere where they're in the gas, high RPMs, versus maybe somewhere where they're on and off. I mean, would that change the amount of time you would want to do an oil analysis?
Well, the easy thing to do is if you take a drain sample, so you can take a sample of oil via draining the oil out when you make a change, or you can use a vacuum pump and actually pull it from your dry sump tank or wet sump in between oil changes if you want to. I would say that depending upon how much money you're racing for, right?
What are the stakes?
What are the stakes involved will really depend upon how often you want to do it. So if you're racing for championships and racing for points and you're heavily invested, then I would say take a sample every time you change the oil. It's the cheapest insurance to do that. If you're just hobby racing and you're having fun, then maybe do it on a find some kind of schedule, right? Let's say you run 6 races a year and maybe do it every other race or every third race. So you're developing some kind of point. And then you know that, hey, if I ran a little bit hotter this weekend or something was a little more unusual, take a sample a little more sooner. But if you build that history, like again, let's say that's a hobby racer where you may run that same engine for 3 or 4 seasons. Well, then if you take a couple of samples a season, then that will give you a good idea of when it's time to rebuild that engine, because you're building that trend line. Because the trend is your friend. That's the biggest thing. One sample is 1 point of data. It's like 1 pixel on your phone screen. It's like, no. You want to have multiple points of data, multiple pixels, so you get a clearer picture.
It gives you a graph of what's actually happening in the motor. And because as the motor ages, as the motor wears, at some point towards the end of its natural life, you're going to see things that are going to creep up. And it just gives you a trend as to when that process is happening. When on our sprint car motors, for example, some of the local guys will run our 410s, 20, 22, 23 races before it comes in for a rebuild. Well, usually because of that, towards the end, all the parts are stressed so much. Towards the end of that 20 to 22 race series, you're going to get some more metals in it, and that's going to tell you that it's time.
Here's another one. I almost forgot about this. All right, Brad. So if you race at the same track, if you race locally and you never really travel around, there's a difference in how often you should sample versus if you travel. So if you're racing locally, you can probably do it less often because you're going to be getting the same fuel, you're going to get the same weather atmospheres, those kind of things. If you're traveling and you're picking up fuel at different racetracks as you go around the country, just because the octane is the same doesn't mean the fuel
doesn't mean the blend's
is the same.
Yeah.
And we've seen that from people that travel. Tony Callis at Callis Rent Sports, one of my good buddies, and he's been doing the Porsche racing around the country, and they're taking samples from every track. And oh my God, you can see the difference in the fuel from track to track to track.
And right in the sample, right?
You can see in the sample, it shows right up, because guess what? You're going to get unburned fuel is going to end up in the oil.
Yes.
And you can see that in the sample. So if you travel and you're picking up fuel at the tracks, I would say do it more often, because again, fuel is the enemy of your oil. So you want to keep a good track on that, and oil sample is the best way to do it.
Is there any value when you're taking your engine back for a rebuild to maybe running through that same dyno procedure that you talked about at the beginning of this webinar and doing it again just to see what it's like at the end of life, let's say?
There's a reason why we normally don't do that. And this is the reason. Every once in a while, we will get an engine in that has come from another engine builder. If we know that the engine is sound, yes, we will put it back on the dyno and we will check it out. We want to see what some of the other guys are doing. People do that with our engines all the time. Normally, when an engine's got 20 to 22 races on it, it's kind of dangerous to do because it's getting close. It's getting close to the end of its life. Like Lake said, the pin's already pulled, and it possibly could make it off the dyno. But if I blow the thing up on the dyno before we rebuild it, that's usually a bad thing. So normally we don't do that. Yeah.
There was a question that came in earlier about target oil and water temps that you use for consistent test results.
Oh, geez. Very good question.
There you go. All right.
Very good question.
So I have worn a path back and forth between the dyno controller and the water control valves back over there, because it's absolutely critical to maintain the same oil temperatures and water temperatures in doing your testing. And one of the things we actually found out on Monday was the new fuel we picked up. I really was happy about it because it was more consistent in terms of power output.
With a greater difference in temperatures,
right?
Which is something that the pump gases weren't. The pump gases, to have any consistency at all, we had to have exactly the same.
I mean, you're talking literally 2 to 3 degrees max difference in temperature, water and oil, to make them be
exactly
the same.
Just as a reference, on the water, we're trying to be from 165, 170 on the oil, because we have a fan cooling the oil fan. The oil, 270, 270. Those are the normal temperatures that we test at.
Yeah, most of the runs we made on Monday, what we'll do again today, is going to be water temperature at 170. So you're going to be 170 minimum, 175 max, and then on the oil temperature, we're going to be 270, 275 max. And we work tirelessly to maintain that. Whatever you got to do to make that go is what you have to do.
It's critical.
Yeah,
it's absolutely critical.
This has been fascinating. And like you guys said, I think we could do this not just for 3 hours, but maybe 3 days. And it's always fun having you here, Lake and Don. This has been awesome.
We were trying to figure out, Brad,
don't tell me an hour's going by already.
We were really trying to figure out how are we going to fit all this in an hour?
Right, exactly. Well, we have. For those who don't know, obviously I worked at Joe Gibbs Racing for 15 years, and we were the guys who developed the driven race one and all that. And Ron and those guys here have been customers of ours from almost the word go with the race oil.
Yeah.
But when we developed the hot rod oil, which is for the muscle cars and stuff, we kind of ran into a technical problem. Obviously at Gibbs, we had all the engine dynos, everything was like this. It was easy to do race oil development because we built lots of race engines. But if you wanted to put a standard flat tappet, small block Chevy camshaft, we didn't have anything in that building you could put it in and it would fit. Because all of our engines are all race cam, big old giant, bored out cam tunnels. You couldn't put a standard core cam in it. And I happen to remember that they had a Spintron, which is like literally right there.
It's right behind it.
It's right behind the camera. I was like, hey, you got a Spintron. So I called Ron, hey, can I come out and borrow your Spintron? He's like, sure. Why? I want to do some wear testing on this flat tappet cam.
Yeah.
I don't want to build an engine if I don't have to. And you got a Spintron. He's like, yeah, sure, come on out. And first thing we did was kill the camshaft.
Just killed it, yeah.
Because there's no crankshaft in the Spintron to splash the oil up. And so there's a little bit there's an oil feed, and for a roller cam, which is what the sprint car motors are,
right.
That's enough oil to make a roller live.
To make it live. Wasn't enough for a flat tappet.
So then
we destroyed that.
We roasted it in like 10 minutes. It was gone.
Yeah.
So then we realized we had to drill holes in there and do all this kind of stuff. But eventually we found out that guess what? You really can't simulate what's happening in an engine
on a Spintron.
You can simulate the valve train dynamics, but you can't simulate combustion blow-by and fuel dilution, which again, what I said earlier, that's the enemy of your oil. In the absence of those two things, your results are not going to be valid. So we decided we needed to build an engine again, oddly enough, if the bell housing won't fit a Toyota at that time, guess what? It doesn't do you any good to do the testing at Gibbs because it won't fit on the dyno. So we built the engine here, and then that's kind of where we started. The mule motor, which is literally still sitting there. Same cranks and rods from 12 years ago.
Oh my
this
God.
literally has over 5,000 dyno runs on it.
It's got to be more than that.
It was 5,000 we counted a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
You know, we pulled a camshaft out the other day. I called Billy Godbold at Comp. I said, hey, you want a camshaft that's got 3 years and about 400 dyno runs on it? He's like, yeah, sure, because we made these cams to fail.
Yeah.
We made them small base circle, really sharp nose radius, very little taper, no phosphate coating. We made them so they would wear. We made the
cam to wear quicker so that we could measure all this stuff.
So we could do a one-day cam test to simulate a year of racing in a day.
Yeah.
So we did that, and we literally, when I came to Total Seal 3 years ago, we just took the cam that was in there, and we've been doing all this testing for 3 years
on the same cam.
On the same camshaft, and we were pulling it out there. That's like, hey, you might want to see this thing.
And again, a lot of that has to do with the fact of the oils that we've been using too.
Right. The good used oils, great parts. Yeah. And you know, and the reality is, you know, Brad, we couldn't do this stuff without the help of our friends. You know, people like Bill Tishner at Holly, you know, Freddie at VP, Billy and all the guys at Comp, you know, Kyle and Ron and Scooter and Dean and everybody at Driven. Matt and all the guys at Total Seal.
Ron Shaver for letting us have fun, because every time Blake comes into town, we just have a blast.
Oh yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of people that have made this possible, and you know, Don and I, you know, really love working together, and we enjoy sharing the things that we've known, because you know we kind of look her up and you realize that, you know, Don grew up out here racing and then did the NASCAR truck stuff and then came back and then did all this stuff with sprint car. Obviously my dad growing up in NASCAR, we've been very privileged to have the experiences
to be around racing for most of our lives.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for us at this point of our lives, we're like, let's give back. We don't. What's it do us any good to take us to the grave?
Right.
It doesn't.
Exactly.
Let's share it. And now we have these great digital platforms where we can reach hundreds of thousands of people easily. Why not do it?
We thought about that, you know, a long time ago, but once we started doing it, once we started sharing, we realized, you know, this is really kind of fun.
Right. And you know what? I have to give credit where credit is due. Chris Douglas at the Edelbrock Group. You're the man, because Chris was the guy that said, hey, you know what? When you're out there at Shavers, why don't you just start doing some live video on Facebook?
Jeez.
And I'm like, yeah, why not? I mean, me and Don get along great, and we would, every once in a while would film a video. And I was like, yeah, I got a phone, I can do a Facebook Live.
And it worked out great. Yeah.
Right, and that's where this whole thing started. It was Chris Douglas with that idea, and then it's just snowballed into all these things that have come from that. So credit to Chris.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have left plenty of resources out there with the videos and everything, which is great. And I'll close this just by saying, I can't wait for the next one because I don't think we barely scratched the surface.
You know, we'll do it again for sure, because we always have so much information. And, you know, in the meantime, like I said, you know, Lake's got this speed diagnostic thing, which is it's just a must. You know, because there's been so many folks that have wanted to see what we are doing. You know, both of us are working on the social media thing. I've actually got my own YouTube page now. It's Dyno Donnie Mac on the YouTube page, DYNO DONNYMAC. And in a few weeks, I'll actually have my own webpage. It's the same thing, dynodonniemac.com. And I'm doing this not for fun, and also too, like I said, we would like to, there's so many people that want to hear some of the knowledge that we've gained over the years. And we just love giving it to people, you know? Yep. So that's what we're doing now.
Awesome. Thank you, gentlemen.
Of course, this will not be the last one.
We appreciate Francine and Judy and yourself and everybody at EPARTRADE for making these possible. Yeah. It's great to see all these webinars. I mean, I watch them all the time. It's great learning. And it's a great platform.
It's great for the industry.
And we want to continue to do it. So we're always here whenever you guys want to talk about it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, and we love your energy and your passion, you know, and everything you bring into it. It's the first time that we had Dyno Don on. I mean, Lake has been on many times, so we'll definitively have you back. You know, part two, because as Brad mentioned, there's plenty of things we haven't, talked about today. So we'll coordinate that with you guys and have you back on the series again soon. So thank you very, very much for being with us today. This webinar is recorded. It will be posted later on the EPARTRADE platform as well as our YouTube channel, distributed through our newsletters. We will take a break next week because of July 4th. So, but we will be back on the 13th of July. We'll be talking dyno again with Dyno Jet. So please join us again. And in the meantime, thank you very much for watching today's episode, number 224. And every single past episode has been recorded and is available on the EPARTRADE platform. So thank you very much. Have a great 4th of July weekend if you are in the US in vacation. And if you're around the world, we will be back on the 13th. Thank you very much. Speediagnostix products have been pushed back on the homepage of the EPARTRADE platform. So take advantage of it and let's go racing. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys. It's been a blast.
Registering on EPARTRADE is easy. Fill out your name, email, phone number, and create a secure password. Next, select your business type. Choose supplier if you're looking to display products or services and connect with buyers. Choose racing business if you're looking to find new parts and connect with suppliers. Choose race team if you own or are a member of a professional racing team. Begin typing your company name. We most likely already have your company in our database, which you can select from the drop-down. Then, enter your job title. Choose Claim Company if you'll be editing your company profile. Other members of your company can choose Join Company if they'd like to use EPARTRADE as well. You can view and agree to our terms of use here. If you'd like to receive our weekly newsletter, choose Accept. Click Register Now, and your registration will be submitted for approval. You'll need to confirm your email once it goes through. To keep our platform industry only, you'll be approved shortly after. If we require additional proof of business, we'll reach out. Welcome to EPARTRADE.